Imagine a world where statues as tall as 10-story buildings stand along the seashores and gardens rise in the deserts, seeming to float in the air. 2,000 years ago, travelers compiled lists of the most incredible structures, calling them the wonders of the world. They were symbols of boundless wealth, faith, and the skill of the great masters of antiquity. We are used to seeing their images in books and films, but the reality is that almost all of them have disappeared. Of the 7 legendary monuments, only the pyramids in Egypt have survived to this day. All the other masterpieces have turned into dust, stones on the ocean floor, or foundations for ordinary residential houses. Where did these giant structures go? And why was humanity unable to preserve them? We will examine exactly how the greatest monuments in history perished and what actually remains of them. This is a story of how time, natural disasters, and human madness erased from the map of the world what once seemed eternal. To understand why the wonders of the world disappeared, we first need to understand how different the ancient world was. In those times, there was no concrete, steel, or electricity, so building such structures was an incredible engineering achievement. People spent many decades mining rare marble, transporting huge amounts of gold, and lifting massive stone blocks to great heights. But when powerful empires began to decline, their greatest symbols also became vulnerable. The reasons these monuments were destroyed were always different and sometimes surrounded by mystery. The story of this particular wonder began with a major war and an astonishing victory that people of the time believed was the result of divine help. In 305 BC, the strong fleet of the general Demetrius the Besieger sailed to the island of Rhodes, bringing with it the most advanced siege technologies of that era. The largest machine was called the Helepolis, meaning the taker of cities. It was a massive tower on wheels, covered with iron plates to protect it from fire and equipped with powerful catapults. The people of Rhodes bravely resisted the attack for an entire year, using every resource they had. Eventually, Demetrius was forced to retreat, abandoning all his siege equipment along the shore. Instead of dismantling the abandoned war machines, the citizens chose to turn these tools of destruction into a symbol of their freedom. They sold the siege towers for large amounts of money and hired the well-known sculptor Chares to create a statue of the sun god Helios. At first, the plan was fairly modest, but as time went on, the ambitions of the Rhodians increased. They initially requested a statue 18 meters tall, but later decided they wanted it to be twice that height. The sculptor agreed, not realizing that doubling the height would require 8 times more building materials. Construction began in 292 BC and continued for 12 years. To lift the heavy components to such great heights, Chares used an unusual technique. A massive earthen ramp was built around the statue, rising higher as the monument grew. Once the work was complete and the earth was removed, a gleaming bronze giant standing 33 meters tall was revealed. The colossus stood on a white marble base at the entrance to the harbor. Inside, it had a strong framework made of iron beams and stone blocks, while the outside was covered with sheets of hammered bronze. Sunlight reflected off the metal, and sailors could see the statue's dazzling shine from many kilometers away. However, the life of this giant statue was unexpectedly short. In 226 BC, a powerful earthquake struck the island. The shaking was so intense that the iron supports inside the statue's legs failed. The bronze god broke at the knees and crashed to the ground, destroying several buildings beneath it. From this event came the expression, "a colossus with feet of clay," which describes something that looks strong on the outside but is fragile within. For nearly 800 years, the fallen giant remained lying along the shore and became a local attraction. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder noted that only a few people were able to wrap both arms around the statue's thumb. The final end came in 653 AD. The island was captured by Arab forces under the command of the general Muawiyah. The new rulers saw the fragments only as a valuable resource. By their order, the remains of the bronze body were cut into pieces. A caravan of 900 camels was needed to transport the metal. The bronze was sold to a merchant who most likely melted the masterpiece down into coins or weapons. Today, at the place where the Colossus is believed to have stood, there are only 2 columns with figures of deer. Not a single fragment of the greatest statue of its time remains that could be studied. the giant simply dissolved into history, leaving behind only the memory of human pride and the fragility of great creations. If the Colossus of Rhodes was a symbol of triumph, then the Lighthouse of Alexandria on the island of Pharos became the highest achievement of engineering thought, serving people for 1,500 years. Its construction began around 285 BC by order of Ptolemy I, one of the closest generals of Alexander the Great. The project was led by the architect Sostratus of Cnidus. There is a story that Sostratus was forbidden to put his name on the building, since all the glory was to belong exclusively to the king. Then the master carved into the stone an inscription saying that he dedicated this work to the gods for the salvation of sailors, covered it with a layer of durable plaster, and wrote the ruler's name on top. Decades later, the plaster crumbled from the sea wind, and the world finally learned the name of the true creator of the Great Tower. The lighthouse was built as a 3-level tower that rose more than 120 meters high, making it one of the tallest structures in the world at that time. The lowest level was square in shape and was used as living space for the many workers and soldiers stationed there. The middle level had 8 sides and was richly decorated with bronze statues. The top level was round, and it was here that an enormous fire was lit every night. To ensure the light could be seen from an incredible distance of up to 50 kilometers, the Greeks used a complex system of large, highly polished bronze mirrors. These mirrors carefully focused the light and reflected it far out across the open sea. During the daytime, a thick column of smoke continuously rose from the tower, also serving as a clear landmark for merchant ships sailing toward the wealthy city of Alexandria from all parts of the Mediterranean. Keeping the lighthouse operating without interruption required huge amounts of dry firewood. This fuel was transported all the way to the top through a wide, gently sloping spiral ramp inside the tower, using strong pack donkeys to carry the load. The lighthouse was so solidly built that it survived the fall of the Ptolemaic Empire, the arrival of Roman forces, and later the Arab conquest. However, the passage of time and the forces of nature slowly weakened its massive foundation. The first truly severe damage occurred in 796 AD, when a powerful earthquake completely destroyed the upper section of the tower, along with its unique lighting system. After this disaster, the lighthouse could no longer serve its original purpose, and for many years functioned only as an observation post used to guard the coastline. In the middle of the following century, Arab rulers tried to restore the structure, but instead of rebuilding the signal fire, they placed a mosque dome on top. From this period comes a strange and mysterious legend involving a Byzantine spy. According to the legend, the Byzantine emperor sent a clever agent to the caliph. This man gained the ruler Es' trust and convinced him that priceless treasures belonging to Alexander the Great were hidden directly beneath the lighthouse's foundation. Believing this story, the caliph ordered the immediate destruction of the building. The workers succeeded in removing the famous mirrors and destroying part of the upper levels before the deception was finally discovered. While this story may be only a historical myth, it is true that the lighthouse began to deteriorate much more rapidly due to poorly planned interference with its internal structure. The final destruction was caused by nature in the 14th century. In 1303 and again in 1323, 2 extremely strong earthquakes struck the area, reducing what remained of the lighthouse to a formless heap of massive stone blocks. When the well-known traveler Ibn Battuta visited Alexandria in 1349, he sadly observed that the tower was in such poor condition that it was physically impossible to enter. Huge blocks of white marble and carved stone figures lay scattered along the shore and in the sea, slowly sinking into the muddy seabed. In 1477, Sultan Qaitbay decided to use this strategic site to protect the city from enemy attacks. He ordered the construction of a powerful fortress on the remaining foundation of the lighthouse, which still exists today. To save time and construction materials, builders reused the cut stones from the ruined wonder of the world. In this way, the Pharos lighthouse quite literally became part of the thick walls of the medieval fortress. At the end of the 20th century, in 1994, French underwater archaeologists discovered hundreds of fragments of ancient statues and enormous stone blocks weighing up to 70 tons on the seabed of Alexandria Bay. These were the real remains of the lighthouse, either thrown into the water during the construction of the fortress or knocked there by the devastating earthquakes. While the lighthouse and the Colossus of Rhodes were physical monuments whose remains have been found by archaeologists, the Hanging Gardens of Semiramis remain the most mysterious of all the wonders of the world. Even today, scholars strongly disagree about whether they truly existed or were simply creations of ancient writers' imagination. According to the most popular legend, the gardens were built in the 6th century BC by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II. He ordered the creation of this man-made marvel for his wife Amytis, who came from the mountainous and green land of Media. In dusty, scorching Babylon, the queen longed for the coolness of forests and the fragrance of flowers, so her husband decided to give her an entire mountain landscape in the middle of a flat plain. Technically, it was an incredibly complex structure for its time. The gardens were a 4-tiered pyramid, with levels connected by wide staircases made of white and pink stone. The base of each tier consisted of massive stone slabs, covered with a layer of reeds sealed with asphalt, and laid with a double layer of bricks. On top, sheets of lead were placed so that irrigation water would not seep down to the lower levels and destroy the supports. Only after this was a layer of fertile soil added, so thick that even huge trees could take root in it. From a distance, it seemed as if the lush crowns were floating in the air, which is how the gardens got their name. One of the main mysteries was the irrigation system. Babylon was located in a region with a very dry climate, and the plants required tons of water every day. Engineers of antiquity devised a unique mechanism. Inside one of the columns, there were pipes through which water from the Euphrates River was constantly lifted to the very top tier. This was done using huge wheels with leather buckets set in motion by slaves. The water flowed downward in artificial streams and waterfalls, creating a pleasant coolness and humidity inside the structure. It was the world's first large-scale irrigation system operating within a multi-level building. Interestingly, the name of the gardens is associated with the Assyrian queen Semiramis, who lived 2 centuries before Nebuchadnezzar. Most likely, Greek historians simply confused the names or merged different legends into one. The true flourishing of the gardens lasted about 200 years. When Alexander the Great captured Babylon in 331 BC, he was so struck by the beauty of this place that he made the city his capital. It is said that it was in the shade of the Hanging Gardens that the great conqueror spent his final days, enjoying the silence and the fragrance of rare plants brought from distant lands. The destruction of the gardens began immediately after Alexander's death. The city gradually fell into decline, and along with it, the complex hydraulic system collapsed. Without a constant supply of water from the Euphrates, the trees quickly dried out under the scorching sun. The roots that had once held the soil in place died off, and the earth began to crumble. Powerful floods, which were frequent in this region, undermined the foundations made of unfired brick. Unlike the Egyptian pyramids, built of solid stone, Babylonian structures were made of clay, which, without maintenance, quickly turns into shapeless mounds. By the start of the Common Era, only the ruins of the great Hanging Gardens remained. When the Roman historian Strabo described the site, he mentioned only broken arches and empty terraces. Later, the desert sands completely covered whatever remained of the structure. In the 20th century, archaeologist Robert Koldewey conducted excavations in Babylon and discovered an unusual foundation with a deep well and a complex network of channels. He believed he had found the gardens themselves. However, modern scholars offer a different theory. They suggest the gardens were not in Babylon, but in the city of Nineveh, built by the Assyrian king Sennacherib. This would explain why no clear inscriptions about such a grand structure have been found in Babylon itself. Either way, the Hanging Gardens of Semiramis completely disappeared, leaving not a single piece of wall or fragment of wood behind. Today, at their supposed site, there are only dusty excavation trenches amid the sands of Iraq. This wonder of the world became the first known example of humans trying to control nature by creating an artificial paradise. But as soon as the mechanism stopped and the city was abandoned, nature took its revenge. The gardens literally disappeared into the landscape, leaving only a beautiful legend about a king's love for his wife. The Temple of Artemis in the city of Ephesus was not just a religious site. It was like a city within a city, regarded as the most magnificent building of the Greek world. Its history is full of dramatic twists, as it was destroyed and rebuilt several times. The grandest version of the temple began construction around 550 BC. Funding came from the legendary Lydian king Croesus, whose name became synonymous with immense wealth. The architects Chersiphron and his son Metagenes faced a major challenge. The region experienced frequent earthquakes, which could instantly turn stone buildings into rubble. To protect the temple, they chose a highly unusual location for its foundation, a marshy lowland near the river. They believed the soft soil would act as a natural shock absorber, lessening the impact of tremors. To build a stable base, they dug a huge pit and filled it with a mixture of charcoal and sheep's wool. Massive marble blocks were then laid on top of this unusual cushion. The temple was enormous. 127 marble columns, each 18 meters tall, supported the roof, and inside were kept masterpieces by the finest sculptors and painters of the time. The temple was not only a place of worship, but also served as the largest bank and as a refuge where anyone could seek protection from persecution. For around 200 years, it flourished, until the fateful night of July 21st, 356 BC. On that night, a man named Herostratus, driven by a desire for eternal fame, sneaked inside and set fire to the wooden beams of the roof. The temple, which had taken decades to build, burned from within in just a few hours. The intense heat cracked and crumbled the marble, turning the masterpiece into a pile of ruins. A famous legend says that on the very night the Temple of Artemis burned, Alexander the Great was born in faraway Macedonia. The citizens of Ephesus punished the culprit severely and took unprecedented measures to erase all memory of him. However, this decision had the opposite effect. The name Herostratus entered history forever as a symbol of the senseless destruction of beauty. When Alexander the Great grew up and conquered these lands, he offered the people of Ephesus to fully finance the restoration of the temple, on the condition that his name be carved on the facade. The townspeople showed diplomatic cunning and refused the king, declaring that it was not fitting for one god to build temples to other gods. As a result, the temple was rebuilt with public funds by 323 BC. It became even more magnificent than before, and stood for several more centuries, surviving even the Roman conquest. The decline of the great sanctuary began with the spread of Christianity and the fall of the Roman Empire. In 263 AD, the city of Ephesus was attacked by Gothic tribes. The temple's treasures were lost during this invasion, and the building itself suffered serious damage. The final blow came with the decree of Emperor Theodosius V in 391 AD, which banned pagan cults. The Temple of Artemis was officially closed and began to be dismantled for building materials. The city's inhabitants no longer saw it as a sacred place. Precious marble slabs were transported to Constantinople for the construction of the Hagia Sophia, and the remaining columns were burned for lime for everyday needs. Over time, the swamp that had once protected the temple from earthquakes became its grave. River deposits and silt gradually flooded the foundation, and the ruins sank deep underground. By the 19th century, nothing remained at the site where one of the wonders of the world had once stood, except a muddy puddle. Only in 1869 did the English archaeologist John Turtlewood, after many years of searching, discover the base of the ancient temple at a depth of 6 meters. Today, in this deserted place, there stands only a single reconstructed column, on whose top stalks build their nests. Of the golden splendor and marble grandeur of Ephesus, almost nothing remains except this lonely pillar in the middle of a marshy valley. If other wonders of the world were dedicated to gods or served practical purposes, this structure became a monument to boundless self-love and grief. In 353 BC, the ruler Mausolus died in the city of Halicarnassus. During his lifetime, he had already begun designing his own tomb, wishing it to outshine all existing temples in beauty. After his death, construction was continued by his widow, Queen Artemisia, who, according to legend, showed exceptional devotion to her husband's memory, dedicating her life to building his monument. For the construction of the tomb, the finest Greek masters of the time were invited. The mausoleum turned out to be unique because it combined three different architectural styles. It was a massive rectangular structure 45 meters high. The base was an enormous marble podium on which stood a temple with 36 columns. Crowning the composition was a stepped pyramid, on top of which rose a marble chariot drawn by a team of 4 horses. In this chariot stood figures of Mausolus himself and Artemisia. The building amazed contemporaries with its whiteness and the abundance of stone sculptures of people and lions. It was so unusual that the king's name entered the language forever, and all large tombs began to be called mausoleums. Unlike many other wonders of the world, this structure proved to be long-lived. It stood for almost 1,000 years, surviving the fall of empires and the campaigns of Alexander the Great. Its greatness was brought to an end by nature itself in the 10th century, when a series of powerful earthquakes struck the region. The tremors destroyed the columns and the heavy pyramidal roof. The great monument turned into a heap of ruins that lay untouched for about 200 years. The final destruction of the mausoleum occurred in 1404 when the Knights Hospitaller arrived. They needed to strengthen their fortress to defend against the Turkish forces and saw the ruins of the mausoleum as free building material. Pieces of the ancient structure were gradually reused for construction. There is a story that the knights discovered a hidden chamber inside the ruins containing a magnificent sarcophagus. But when they returned the next morning, the chamber had already been looted by pirates. By the 19th century, only a deep pit remained at the site of the mausoleum. Today, fragments of the giant chariot are preserved in the British Museum, while in the monument's homeland, visitors can only see an empty site with broken columns. Unlike the other wonders of the world, this creation was not outdoors, but inside a temple. In the 430s BC, the great sculptor Phidias completed a statue designed to capture the majesty of the supreme Greek god, Zeus. The god sat on a massive throne made of cedar and decorated with precious stones. The figure was so enormous that if Zeus had stood up, he would have crushed the roof of the temple. The statue reached a height of 15 meters. Phidias used the chryselephantine technique, which meant the frame was made of wood, while the exposed parts of the god's body were covered with ivory plates, and the clothing and shoes were made of pure gold. The statue appeared alive. Zeus's eyes were made of large, precious stones, and a golden wreath of olive branches adorned his head. In his right hand, he held Nike, the goddess of victory, and in his left, a scepter topped with an eagle. Pilgrims entering the temple felt awe and reverence. It was said that when Phidias was asked if he had seen Zeus in person before making the statue, he replied that he had only followed the descriptions in Homer's poems. Another story tells that after finishing the statue, Phidias asked Zeus for a sign of approval. At that very moment, a lightning bolt struck the black marble floor of the temple without harming the statue. To protect the ivory from cracking due to humidity or dryness, priests regularly rubbed the statue with olive oil. In front of the throne, a basin filled with oil was placed, which not only preserved the material, but also reflected sunlight entering the doors, creating the effect of a mysterious glow emanating directly from the god. For nearly 800 years, Olympian Zeus remained one of the most sacred objects of the ancient world. Even the Roman Emperor Caligula, known for his madness, tried to move the statue to Rome and replace the god's head with his own, but legend says that as soon as workers approached, the statue let out a loud, terrifying laugh, causing the scaffolding to collapse and frightening everyone nearby. The statue's end came with changes in the world order. In 391 AD, Emperor Theodosius III banned the Olympic Games and closed all pagan temples. The Temple of Zeus was abandoned, and its valuable decorations became easy prey for looters. Around 416 AD, efforts were made to save the statue. It was dismantled and transported to Constantinople, where it entered the private collection of a wealthy official named Lausus. There it remained for several more decades among other ancient masterpieces. The final tragedy occurred in 475 AD. A massive fire broke out in Constantinople, destroying entire districts of the city. The palace of Lausus burned to the ground, and along with it, the great statue perished in the flames. The wooden frame ignited instantly. The gold melted and flowed into the ashes, and the ivory plates turned to dust. Of one of the most expensive and majestic monuments in history, nothing remained except descriptions and images on ancient coins. The temple in Olympia itself, where Zeus had once stood, was completely destroyed by a powerful earthquake in the 6th century. Today, only fallen columns lie at the site, reminding us of the scale of the building. In the local museum, one can see only the workshop of Phidias, which archaeologists discovered near the ruins. The story of the 6 lost wonders of the world is not just a list of catastrophes, but a vivid example of how fleeting human glory is. We have seen that neither colossal size, nor gold, nor military power could save these monuments from their inevitable end. Each of them perished in its own way. The only wonder that has remained with us, the Great Pyramid of Khufu, survived solely thanks to its extreme simplicity and the incredible mass of stone, which cannot be burned or easily dismantled. All the other masterpieces have turned into myths, forcing us to wonder what they truly looked like. Today, archaeologists continue to search for fragments of these structures, hoping piece by piece to restore what once united humanity in its pursuit of perfection and beauty.